Crying without end, the shocking family truth that will change how you see them forever. My beloved child. Tonight you will hear a story that was never meant to reach daylight, a story wrapped in lullabies and locked behind smiles, a story that begins with love but breathes through silence, and as I speak, notice how your chest feels heavier with every sentence, because this is not entertainment, this is a slow opening of a door you were taught never to touch, a door inside your own house, inside your own blood, where tears were trained to fall quietly so the walls would never remember their sound. You thought crying had an end, you believed tears came to teach a lesson and then leave, but some crying is trained to live forever, passing from one generation to the next like a shadow that learns new shapes, and tonight you are going to understand why the elders in your family always changed the subject when certain names were spoken, why laughter felt rehearsed during gatherings, why photographs were carefully framed to hide the edges. This is not about blaming anyone yet, this is about watching the truth stand up slowly, like a person who has been sitting in darkness for decades, stretching its limbs, preparing to be seen. Stay with me, because the moment you think you understand, something deeper will shift, and the family you thought you knew will quietly rearrange itself in your mind. Listen closely now. The first secret is never dramatic on the surface, it is ordinary, almost boring, which is why it survives for so long. In your family, pain was not screamed, it was organized. Tears were allowed only in private rooms, grief was scheduled between responsibilities, and love was measured by how much one could endure without asking questions. That system did not appear by accident. Long before you were born, before your parents learned how to smile for others, a decision was made at a dinner table where everyone pretended to agree. One voice was softer than the rest, one pair of eyes kept dropping to the floor, and when the final word was spoken, something inside that person folded permanently. From that night onward, the family learned a powerful rule: survival comes from silence. What you were told was tradition was actually adaptation. What you were shown as strength was actually fear wearing clean clothes. And every time someone cried without knowing why, every time emotions felt too big for small reasons, it was the echo of that night returning, asking to be noticed. Here is where your breathing might change. Because the truth is not only about what happened, it is about what was repeated. Children were raised to be good, but good meant quiet. Dreams were praised, but only the safe ones. Love was given, but conditionally, like a loan that demanded obedience as interest. One family member learned early that their role was not to be happy, but to hold the weight for everyone else. You saw them as strong, reliable, unbreakable, but you never saw the cost. That person became the container for unspoken regrets, absorbed disappointments that were never theirs, and smiled through moments where crying would have been the most honest response. This is why your family celebrates endurance more than joy. This is why emotional honesty feels awkward in your house. This is why when someone finally breaks down, the room goes silent, not out of care, but out of panic, because the system does not know how to function when truth becomes loud. Now let me say something that will stay with you long after this ends. The crying that never stops is not weakness, it is memory. Your family did not just hide a secret, they built a life around it. They taught themselves to function around a wound instead of healing it. Every generation learned the same lesson in different words: do not ask too much, do not feel too deeply, do not disturb the balance. And you, without realizing it, inherited that lesson. The moments you felt guilty for wanting more, the times you questioned your own emotions, the nights you cried and could not explain why, those were not personal failures, those were signals. Signals that something unfinished was moving through you, asking for acknowledgement. The shocking part is not that your family kept this truth hidden. The shocking part is that they believed silence was kindness, that by not speaking, they were protecting love, when in reality, they were teaching pain how to travel safely through time. And now we arrive at the edge of something irreversible. Because once you see this, you cannot unsee it. The family you admired for its unity, its discipline, its sacrifices, will begin to look different. Not evil, not cruel, but human in a way that feels unsettling. You will start noticing pauses in conversations, the way certain stories are told without endings, the way some emotions are redirected into work, duty, or control. This is the moment where crying either continues forever, or finally finds its voice. What happens next will challenge everything you were taught about loyalty, love, and respect. Because the truth that is coming does not destroy families, it exposes the price they paid to stay together. Stay here. Do not look away. The next part will take you to the exact moment where this silence was chosen, and once you stand there, nothing about them will ever look the same again. The night no one talks about began without warning. There was no storm outside, no dramatic argument, no raised voices to mark it as important. It started quietly, which is why it succeeded. A family gathering, ordinary on the surface, familiar food, familiar faces, familiar roles being played perfectly. But beneath that normalcy, something fragile was waiting to collapse. One truth had grown too heavy to carry alone, and one person, exhausted from holding it, finally believed this was the moment it could be shared. They rehearsed the words in their mind, not to accuse, not to attack, but to release themselves from a burden that was slowly crushing their spirit. When they finally spoke, their voice did not shake, but the room did. Because what they revealed was not a single mistake, it was a pattern, and patterns threaten systems more than individual faults ever could. In that moment, everyone understood that if this truth was allowed to exist, the family would never function the same way again. What happened next is where the real damage was done. No one denied the truth. That is important for you to understand. Silence was chosen not because the truth was false, but because it was inconvenient. Eyes met across the table, subtle nods were exchanged, and an unspoken agreement formed faster than any spoken sentence. The truth would be acknowledged privately, but never publicly. It would be carried, but never displayed. It would be remembered, but never named. The person who spoke was not yelled at, they were not punished in obvious ways, which made the outcome even more cruel. They were praised for their maturity, thanked for their honesty, and then gently repositioned as the one responsible for keeping the peace. From that night forward, their pain became a responsibility rather than a wound. They were told, without words, that loving this family meant swallowing their truth so everyone else could continue breathing comfortably. This is where the crying without end truly began. Because when pain is not allowed to move outward, it turns inward. That person learned to doubt their own reactions, to question whether their feelings were too much, to wonder if their honesty had been selfish. Over time, the memory of the event blurred, but the emotional impact sharpened. They became quieter, more accommodating, more reliable. You admired them without realizing why their smile never reached their eyes. And the family rewarded this behavior. They called it sacrifice. They called it strength. They held this person up as an example, never noticing that examples are often built from broken pieces. The system worked. Life went on. New children were born. Celebrations continued. But beneath it all, something was leaking, and it leaked into everyone, including you. Here is the part that changes how you see them forever. The silence did not stay with one person. It spread. Children learned what topics felt heavy before they understood why. Teenagers sensed which emotions were acceptable and which ones created discomfort. Adults learned to redirect vulnerability into productivity. Over time, the family developed an emotional language that avoided depth while pretending to be close. Love was expressed through duty, care through control, concern through advice instead of listening. And whenever someone felt overwhelmed without a clear reason, the explanation was always personal weakness, never inherited pain. This is why crying felt endless. Because you were taught to manage emotions that were never fully yours to begin with. You were responding to echoes, not events. You were grieving something unnamed, something unresolved, something that had been waiting decades to be acknowledged. Now pause here, because what comes next is not gentle. The shocking truth is that many of them believed they were doing the right thing. They truly thought silence was protection. They believed that by containing the truth, they were preserving harmony, reputation, stability. They did not see that they were teaching the next generation to disconnect from their own emotional instincts. They did not realize they were normalizing quiet suffering. And when someone like you begins to feel restless, emotional, or dissatisfied without an obvious cause, it threatens that fragile balance again. This is why your questions feel uncomfortable to them. This is why your emotions may have been minimized. Because you are standing too close to the truth they spent their lives avoiding. In the next part, you will see exactly how this silence shaped your role in the family, and why your awakening now is not accidental, but inevitable. Before you ever learned to name your feelings, your role was already chosen. Not announced, not written, but quietly assigned through reactions, expectations, and subtle rewards. You were observed more than you realize. How quickly you adjusted. How easily you apologized. How naturally you carried responsibility that was never asked of you. The family did not sit together and decide who you would become, but they shaped the space around you so that becoming anything else felt unsafe. When you were calm, you were praised. When you were understanding, you were appreciated. When you were silent during emotional moments, you were called mature. And each compliment gently pushed you closer to a version of yourself that fit perfectly into the existing system. You were not loved less. In fact, you were loved deeply. But you were loved for how well you adapted, not for how honestly you felt. This is why something inside you has always felt slightly misplaced, like you were living your life one step away from yourself. Here is the part most people never see. The family did not need to tell you their secret for you to inherit its weight. You learned it through atmosphere. Through the way tension entered the room when certain topics appeared. Through the way laughter became louder after uncomfortable moments, as if joy was being used to erase something. Through the way emotional conversations were shortened, redirected, or solved too quickly. You absorbed the message that harmony mattered more than truth. That togetherness mattered more than clarity. That love meant adjusting, not revealing. Over time, you became incredibly skilled at reading emotional undercurrents. You sensed moods before words. You anticipated needs before requests. You learned how to keep things smooth. But the cost of this skill was high. Because when you are trained to manage everyone else's comfort, you lose touch with your own inner signals. This is why your crying feels confusing. This is why relief never lasts long. This is why peace feels conditional. At some point, you began to notice the imbalance, even if you could not explain it. You started feeling tired after family interactions that looked normal from the outside. You questioned yourself after expressing emotions, wondering if you had said too much. You felt guilty for needing space, clarity, or validation. These were not signs of selfishness. These were symptoms of awareness. Awareness is always uncomfortable in systems built on silence. The moment you start asking why you feel the way you do, the old structure begins to shake. And that is when subtle resistance appears. You may have noticed it. Gentle reminders to be patient. Suggestions to let things go. Advice wrapped in concern that leads you away from your own questions. None of this is accidental. It is the system protecting itself. Because your clarity threatens the agreement made long before you were born. Now understand this carefully. The family's pain does not make them villains, but it does explain their limits. They learned to survive by not looking too closely at their own wounds. They taught stability through endurance, not healing. And when you begin to step outside that pattern, it exposes what they never resolved. This is why your growth may feel lonely. This is why your emotional honesty might be misunderstood. This is why you may feel both deeply connected to them and strangely distant at the same time. You are standing between two realities. The inherited one, built on quiet endurance. And the emerging one, built on truth and integration. The tension you feel is not confusion. It is transition. And here is the revelation that changes everything. You were never meant to carry this forever. The crying without end was never a life sentence. It was a signal waiting for the right moment. A moment when someone strong enough, aware enough, and compassionate enough would finally pause and ask what this pain belonged to. That person is you. Not to confront. Not to accuse. But to see clearly. Because once pain is seen, it no longer needs to repeat itself. In the next part, you will confront the unspoken fear beneath the silence, the fear that kept everyone trapped, and you will finally understand why breaking this pattern feels so dangerous, and yet so necessary. My beloved child, the truth you are about to hear will pierce the walls of everything you believed about home. Every smile you cherished. Every hug you trusted. There is a story hidden in silence, a story that nobody dared to tell. Until now. When you think of family, you imagine love, warmth, safety. But what if the very people who promised you these things were carrying secrets that could shatter your heart? Every laugh in the living room, every gentle word in the kitchen, suddenly becomes something else. Something heavy. Something haunting. The people you held closest are not what they seem. It started with small signs. Whispered conversations you accidentally overheard. A door that clicked shut when it shouldn't. Faces that froze when you entered the room. At first, you convinced yourself it was nothing. Just imagination. But reality does not forgive ignorance. The pieces fit together, and when they do, the picture is terrifying. You realize you have been walking through a house filled with shadows, and those shadows were people you loved. Then came the moment that changed everything. You discovered a hidden drawer. Inside, letters you were never meant to see. Secrets revealed in ink that screamed betrayal. Every word a crack in the foundation of your world. Every line a revelation that your heart was not alone in its fears. The family you trusted had been keeping stories from you, stories that explain everything you felt but never understood. And now, you sit there, trying to breathe, trying to hold the fragments of your belief in love together. But the truth is merciless. Once it is seen, it cannot be unseen. The tears flow, not just for yourself, but for the innocence lost. For the illusions destroyed. For the silent betrayal that now sits like a shadow in every corner of your life. The shocking family truth is no longer hidden. It will change how you see them forever. My beloved child, what if I told you the people you called family were capable of hiding a truth so deep, it changes the very meaning of home? Every word, every gesture, every memory you held dear now comes with a shadow. A shadow that whispers, "You never really knew me." It began with a single clue, almost invisible. A photo misplaced. A name mentioned once and forgotten. But your mind, sharp and relentless, notices. Pieces start to connect in ways that are terrifyingly clear. The walls of your house, the floors you walked on, the rooms where you laughed, they all hold echoes of a story they tried to erase. And suddenly, you realize you've been a stranger in the very place you thought was safe. Then the confrontations begin. Not loud, not dramatic. Quiet moments where eyes meet and something unsaid hangs in the air. Every conversation becomes a battlefield. Every question is loaded with risk. And with every passing day, the feeling grows, the family you thought you knew was a careful mask. A mask that hid truths which could break your heart in pieces too small to gather. And the revelations? They keep coming, one after another, relentless. Secrets about choices made long before you were born. Lies that shaped your life without your knowledge. And the worst part is how ordinary it all seemed until now. The most shocking truths often hide in the smallest details: a forgotten envelope, a cancelled trip, a phone call never returned. Every clue feels like a dagger, every discovery a new wound. Finally, you understand. You understand that love can be real, yet intertwined with betrayal. That care can exist, yet conceal a dangerous truth. And as the tears fall, as the heart aches, one thing becomes painfully clear: nothing will ever feel the same again. The family you once adored has become a story of secrets. A story that will change the way you see them forever. My beloved child, sometimes the hardest truths are the ones whispered behind closed doors. And in your home, those whispers were louder than any shout. Every corner, every hallway, every familiar room suddenly feels like a place where secrets breathe. And you, the unsuspecting heart, are finally seeing it all. It started with a memory you couldn't place. A small inconsistency that made your chest tighten. The way someone avoided your gaze. The way laughter felt slightly off, like it was hiding something. You brushed it aside, convincing yourself it was imagination. But the mind has a way of remembering what the heart refuses to see. The shadows of truth were there all along, patiently waiting. Then came the moment that broke the illusion completely. A letter, a message, a photograph, something that was never meant for your eyes. And when you saw it, the air seemed to shift. You realized that every act of kindness, every comforting word, had layers you could never have imagined. It wasn't all lies, but it wasn't entirely honest either. The foundation of your trust had cracks too deep to ignore. Now, every interaction carries weight. Every smile carries a question. Every hug carries a memory that may not have been as pure as you thought. The people who raised you, who told you family is forever, were guarding a story that could rewrite your world. And as you sit with this knowledge, the tears come, not just for the deception, but for the innocence lost. For the version of family you will never get back. And yet, even in this pain, there is clarity. You understand that truth, no matter how shocking, is stronger than illusion. You see the people you love differently, yes. But you also see yourself, stronger, wiser, more aware. The shocking family truth will change everything, but it also gives you something no lies ever could: the power to face reality, unflinching and unafraid. My beloved child, some truths are like storms you never see coming. And this storm is about to wash over everything you thought you knew about your family. The walls you trusted, the voices you loved, the very foundation of your life, everything trembles under the weight of what is about to be revealed. It started with a quiet observation, something so subtle it almost escaped your notice. A glance that lingered too long. A conversation cut short. A hesitation in someone's voice. You didn't understand it then, but now, in hindsight, you see it clearly. These were cracks. Cracks hiding secrets, cracks hiding truths too heavy to speak aloud. And you, my beloved child, were the last to notice. The revelations hit in waves. First, a hidden letter tucked in a drawer. Then, a photograph you had never seen. Then, stories whispered between family members, not meant for your ears. Each discovery a shock. Each revelation a fracture in your perception of home. You realize now that your entire childhood, every moment you thought was ordinary, had layers you could never have imagined. And the hardest part? Understanding that love and betrayal can exist side by side. That people can care for you deeply and still conceal truths that hurt you more than any action could. The comforting memories, the warm embraces, the laughter, they are now tinged with shadows. Shadows that make you question not just your family, but the very meaning of trust. But even in this darkness, there is a glimmer. A realization that truth, no matter how shocking, is liberating. You are no longer blind to the hidden stories, no longer naive to the concealed intentions. The family you knew has changed forever in your eyes. But so have you. Stronger. Wiser. Ready to face reality, no matter how painful. And that, my beloved child, is a power that no secret can take away. My beloved child, there comes a moment when the mask falls. And suddenly, the people you called family are no longer who you thought they were. Every word they said, every gesture you trusted, now carries a hidden meaning. The truth is heavy. The truth is relentless. And it cannot be ignored. It began with a quiet confession, almost hidden in a casual conversation. A phrase dropped, a detail revealed. You froze, heart pounding, realizing that everything you believed was incomplete. There were layers of secrets, carefully buried, waiting for the day you would notice. And now that day has come. You can't go back. You can't undo what you have learned. Then the evidence became undeniable. A series of letters, photos, and messages, all pointing to decisions made in silence. Decisions that shaped your life without your consent. And as you piece it together, you realize the depth of the deception. The people you trusted most were living a story without you. And the story they told themselves was one of control, concealment, and silent betrayal. The emotional weight is crushing. Every memory you cherished is now tinted with doubt. Every hug, every smile, every reassuring word holds a new meaning. And yet, in this pain, there is clarity. You see the truth not as a weapon, but as a lens. A lens through which you can finally understand. And even as the tears fall, even as your heart aches, you know, this revelation changes everything, forever. And now, my beloved child, you stand at a crossroads. One path leads to denial, to pretending everything is as it once was. The other path leads to awareness, to strength, to understanding the reality of those you call family. The shocking truth will forever alter your perception. And once you accept it, there is no turning back. The family you knew is gone. But the person you are becoming, stronger, wiser, unafraid, is just beginning.